Hey y'all, welcome back to the Takeoff. This is Max Henry, and this week we have Callun Lavington, who you might know as at Callun Parkour on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Callun is the digital lead at Parkour UK, and he's also been making tons of really fun, interesting, entertaining content for those three mediums that I just mentioned. So the thing that I wanted to talk to Callun about is for a long time, short form content in parkour has gone either in the direction of pure athletic prowess, think Joe Scandred or Dom Tomato, or it has gone in the sort of like memeified Bob Reese direction. And Callan is one of the few people who's exploring a middle ground where he's talking to not always necessarily the parkour community. A lot of times it is the parkour community, but it's approachable and it's fun and it's entertaining and it's different, but it feels digitally native. And I just wanted to talk about where that approach came from, and that turns out to be part of a really interesting and intense story about a severe brain injury that he is still recovering from, and why he has developed that approach and where he thinks that that could go in the future. So if you are a athlete or you're parkour adjacent and you're interested in content, this is a great episode. I definitely got a ton of inspiration and some really strong takeaways, and I hope you do too. Callun Lavington, thank you so much for coming on. Did I pronounce your last name correctly? I should have asked.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, that's correct. Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It's yeah, pretty cool. So,
And for the listener who may hear my congestion, it is Callun with an N. So if you get confused, you're like, wait, what? He's having another Callum on back-to-back weeks, and we've got Callun this time. We're going in alphabetical order.
yeah, it's a weird name. It's I don't know where it came from. I've always asked my mum why it ends with an N rather than M, but she's never told me the story. But there's now, what's it, Callan Biddle as well, who's just like
Yep.
sort of very south of the UK. It kind of makes me not feel much like an alien in the community now because there's another one. So
Having recently had to name a kid, well, 2 years ago having to name a kid, it's all off of vibes. So there's no judgment. There's no judgment. Well, Callun, I think the thing that I wanted to have you on to talk about is that you've been making tons of really like diverse and to me incredible content.
oh,
It's been
thank you.
really entertaining and I've loved to see the range. And I do want to ask you a ton about that because I also am obviously really fascinated with creating content around parkour culture. But before I hopped into that, I realized I don't actually know your sort of origin story and how you got into parkour. And while I don't love to always start a podcast with that because it's like the universal intro to every parkour podcast ever, in this case where culture is so pivotal to the stuff that you're making, I do think it's probably played an important role. So would you mind kind of telling me about how you got into the sport?
Yeah, so I started in 2012, May 4th specifically. I do remember it quite well.
Nice.
But yeah, it's just always been stuck in my brain, and each year I kind of like have a little celebration and all of that stuff. But started so I used to live in Horsham, which is the same town as obviously Max and Benj Cave from Stora. So I saw Storm Free Run Volume 1. It popped up and like the YouTube recommended. Watched that. Absolutely blew my mind just seeing these guys doing huge flips and stuff. And I was like, I want to do that. So I ran down to the park at the end of my road, hopped over the fence and did a very poor front flip off of it's almost like a triangular structure underneath like a zip wire in just like a kids
Yeah.
play park, and I tried doing a flip off of that and it didn't go very well, but
Did you make it to your back at least?
I did, yeah, I did make it round, but yeah, just no idea how to land it at all.
You're early on the downward dive roll game. That's all. You're a
Yeah,
pioneer.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And yeah, and like the guys who lived up my road, like they were also interested, and they'd already seen Stora videos, like a couple of I think the Lisbon has us now video just dropped or something like that. So we watched that and then realized that they actually jump in the town that we're part of. So we kind of had a roadmap of all the spots and things like that. And then met like David Witchell and kind of that community, and I guess just from there just carried on, didn't really sort of look back. It's, you know, one of the only things I've ever stuck to really. The guys that I started with no longer do it, but yeah, I like to think that I kind of carry that torch almost for us, like, you know, the kids running down the park at the end of the road, like I still have that aspect to me when I go out and train and stuff. So yeah, that, I mean, that's really how I got started with it all. So be 14 years this year. So
Congrats. I'm really jealous that you know the exact date. I've tried to find the only date that I have is September 28th, 2007 is when I joined the New York Parkour forums. So that
okay.
was I could find the sign up date of when I joined the forums, but I'd been training for a few months before that and I can't, it's just like at this point it all muddles together. So I'm like sometime late summer-ish 2007, but I'm really jealous that you get to throw a May 4th celebration and then you got Cinco de Mayo the next day, just back to
Yeah.
back banger weekend right there. I love the description, by the way. The way you just described your parkour journey. First of all, Storm Origins is an insane video to have as your first one. That sets the bar for content at a pretty high level.
Yeah.
But then in my brain, please tell me if this is accurate. I just pictured you like Bilbo Baggins jumping over like the little fence and then just running off and like finding a place to front flip, no hesitation, just like chucking it. Was it a bit more thoughtful than that, or was it like just pure euphoria?
It was kind of like, yeah, it was, obviously we watched it and we was like super hyped. We'd kind of seen it in James Bond before, like me and my brother when we were younger, we watched James Bond, but it didn't really, because like we were into spies when we were kids, so that's just the aspect of it that we were focused on. We didn't really focus on the parkour aspect, but I think the Storm free run aspect of it, literally I went out, ran up the road, knocked on the door of the neighbours and went, yeah, let's go, like, because we did the hopping over the fences and the stuff anyway, like we were quite explorative and active kids, so we were hopping over the fences. It was just trying to refine it, and then deciding that, I saw Paul Joseph do a big front flip down Trafalgar Square or Leicester Square or whatever it was, and I was like, I'm going to try that, and just straight to back cooked myself, but it didn't put me off.
Like
so
blue. Yeah.
should have. Yeah. No, it was yeah, but yeah, just, it still makes me giddy thinking about it now. So yeah.
Yeah. You recently posted something. Is it Boxcat, the alley in Horsham, it's got all the 180s?
Candy Box, yeah, that's the one.
Or Candy Box, yeah. Yeah, Boxcat's the spot in London, isn't it? That's
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's really cool. I didn't know you were from Horsham. It's amazing. It's such a small town, and as you'd mentioned, obviously Max and Benj. I remember seeing Josh going there all the time, Drew going there all the time, and then David and Julian, right, is David's brother, Witchell brothers.
So David and Alex. Alex is the brother.
Alex.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't know how I spaced on Alex's name. I'm so sorry. Yeah, it's crazy how that has just spawned a really influential generation. And David's now doing a ton with Super XXL in London, which is really cool. So you had, I would say, like you kind of entered in the golden era of content from my perspective. So what resonated with the content that you saw then? And as we were just kind of about to hop on, you're saying that there's kind of a whole story that helped you develop the style of content you're creating now. So I guess, what did you enjoy when you got into parkour about the stuff that you were seeing? And has that played into your journey to creating the type of things that you're making now?
Yeah, I think when I started, and probably up until, I would say, 2017, 2018 sort of time, it was almost like a spectacle, like watching a parkour video, or like when a team like dropped a new edit and things like that. It felt very special, and this was, I think, before really, I think, everyone fully had access to like a nice camera or a smartphone that could film in like high quality and things like that. It was like I mentioned Lisbon has us now, but there's a ton of other videos out there, Team Gestion and things like that. There were
Mm-hmm.
these, like, I guess, group of young people with a DSLR camera, but they just make these fantastic videos that,
Yeah.
when I was younger and when I started with the group that I started with, we wanted to make videos exactly like that. We started filming very early on, but I think over time the landscape kind of shifted when Instagram started allowing you to kind of upload videos on there. The whole saving your clips for an edit kind of died down a little bit, and then people were just posting yearly compilations of their Instagram clips onto YouTube, and there was still some gold out there. Like, people were still releasing edits, but it definitely sort of changed and shifted, I think, to a lot of obviously the short form content. And that was, I think, for a range of reasons. Obviously, I think some people were obviously moving on with their lives. They were no longer training or making films. I think like the Team Gestion guys, for example, I think just moved on to other things. So those videos stopped. Coaching organizations became sort of bigger, and there were more parkour coaching classes going on, sort of thing. And I think that might have shifted it a little bit as well, where like the kids aren't going through that pathway of creating videos with their friends as much anymore. They're going through like a coach class, coach session where they might go to compete, or they might go and train with their coaches or whatever, but there isn't really that much of a focus on the video aspect of things. So yeah, I think Instagram was probably the biggest one. I remember 2017 specifically being a kind of like shift in that. And I'm guilty of that. I stopped making videos on YouTube and decided to move over to posting my training clips on Instagram, which is something I kind of regret now, because it's very hard to go back and track progress as much. Like, as a conversation I was having with my girlfriend the other week was, and I guess kind of reflects in some of the content that I share as well. I'm asking questions like, what's your favorite song from a parkour video, or what's your favorite parkour video of all time? It's because, like, to me, those parkour films or videos I watched when I was younger, they really stood out, and they were memorable, and to me, because of the soundtrack, of the movement, because of the location or whatever. And I feel like we miss that now with Instagram. Like, it's so quick and so
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I really agree, and I feel like a way to, I mean, first of all, it's probably good to point out that people who wanted to make money off of parkour in that sort of early golden era, because brands who were paying, they essentially the only way to monetize parkour at the time was either to be a sponsored athlete or get a brand to pay for you to be on their campaign, or all of that was short form in the context of advertisement or YouTube or a Vimeo short film or something. And then when the brand started moving to short form video, all of a sudden that's also what they were looking for when they were recruiting. And I do think that is something that maybe people overlook. You don't need Sasha and Toby to edit a Channel 4 part for you anymore. You just need Dom to do one massive front flip that goes viral, and you have 30 million impressions as opposed to 3 million impressions on an amazing 7-minute piece that got screened on live television or something. But also, I think your point about this like frame shift from long form to short form is really important. And I think that the long form, and I'm really curious to hear if you agree or disagree, it framed like the movement was not the protein of the meal. It wasn't the meat. It was like the icing on top. It was just, a lot of my favorite videos, I actually can't even remember a specific highlight clip. I just remember the vibe, the music, the setting, the pacing of the edit, the like Brooks pulling his pants down and running naked into the ocean. I couldn't tell you what, Jump Callum did in an old store video, or like which one had this specific Foskey reverse precision clip or anything like that. And then Instagram did the opposite, where suddenly the only focus was the movement because you only had 5 seconds to tell your story. And so you had to get across the key thing that you wanted to get across in that context, which was now the athleticism. Would you agree? Like, does that feel accurate to you?
I think so. Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with it almost. It's like the biggest way that I almost see it these days is back then. You know, I started in 2012. Storm Free Run Volume 1 was the video that I saw. That was a parkour cinematic masterpiece. Everyone who watched that video back then had that as an inspiration to go out and use to shoot, basically. So, we had a period where every team and their best mate were releasing these polished cinematic parkour edits with with nice movement, but also, Stora are another example. The early Stora videos, there was the hijinks, there was the fun, the inside jokes. I think it's the Breach channel now, but Chris and Dan Ilabaka back in the day as well, having a lot of those like, I guess, like community moments where it's like you see something funny going on, or someone runs naked into the ocean. And I think now, like, we've lost an element of that in a way, I think, moving over to short form, because we have the 5 seconds to tell the story. And for a lot of people, especially when they're moving over, or when they were moving over to short form in the commercial aspect of things, your friend running naked into the sea isn't going to get you the brand deal, but you doing that front flip or that side flip or whatever it is going to do it. So I think, yeah, there's been a huge change in it, I think. And wouldn't say it's fully gone, but we are losing it, which is a shame. But
Yeah, so how has that played into where you're at now? Because I wouldn't say you're reviving or replicating what, and this is cool too, because I think that in a lot of these conversations, it's funny talking with Callum, Pal, talking with Wentz and Yang. It's like everybody that was around in that era has this perception that the sort of 2009 to 2013, 14 was this golden age for parkour cinematic short films and culture. Because I do think that's when we really built this visual language, and everybody has a sense of like there's something that's happening that we're losing that, but it almost feels like here we're dissecting a little bit of the reason behind it. What has inspired you to now go into making the stuff that you're making now? And would you mind, I guess, yeah, describing what type of content you're creating?
yeah, so at the moment I'm creating, I guess, just a range of content. There's like a little bit of parkour news, there's parkour memes, there's movement breakdowns. So when I go out training, I'll film the process and then commentate over the clips as to how I got to that point within the challenge. And just like, I guess, whatever I feel like sharing, really. That's kind of like, I ask some questions to the community. I've done a few overlay like some text on a few training clips, just asking the question, or just doing a piece to camera, just asking. And the reason I've kind of gone towards making that content is I was very much, until a couple years ago, was very much like, I miss the, I was only in the golden years for like 2 years or whatever, but I was like, I miss the days where people put effort into these cinematic YouTube projects, and I fell into the Instagram trap of sharing my content and sharing my training and trying to post daily, and it did, it brought me some very, very good opportunities. COVID hit, so I had to get a job that was away from coaching and away from parkour, and I think I was a bit bitter about that. And then got the job with Parkour UK, which I think we'll touch on in a little bit as well. There is a reason I'm backtracking so much on this. It will make sense in a moment. So yeah, I was a little bit bitter that, you know, people weren't focusing on shit like making these YouTube edits and stuff. And then in 2024, so nearly 2 years ago, I had a really nasty accident from doing parkour. And this was actually whilst I was sort of filming towards a video project, and I think capturing a clip for Instagram as well. I think that was going on when I had this accident. But I fell about 12 feet directly onto my head, which resulted in my brain rattling inside my skull, which caused bleeds, bruising, swelling with inside the brain, like fluid was leaking all over the place, shattered both of my wrists, and basically spent 4 days in the like A&E, which is like the emergency department over here in the UK, being told that the likelihood of me going back to parkour again was highly unlikely, not allowed to hit my head again. And yeah, so that was quite miserable. And then I think whilst I was recovering from that, I was sat there like, I've just had one of the most important things from the way that I create content, from the, you know, from coaching, from what I do as a social time, as a hobby, as a job, that's just been taken away from me. Like that physical aspect of moving and filming my training has been taken away from me. So I was kind of like, oh, what do I do? Like, I've just lost the most important thing to me. I don't know if I can get back to doing it again. And whilst I was recovering from the brain injury and I was at home and stuff, I was trying to build up the like looking at screens and stuff again. So, you know, I'd give myself a little bit of screen time each day that doesn't overwhelm the brain. And I started watching a lot of content across like YouTube and things like that. And I think I saw like a skateboarder do like a skate park review or something like that. And I was like, I don't need to train parkour to still be connected and involved with the community. Like there's different ways that I can kind of create from that. So about 6 months after the injury, the guys that I coached with, we went down to Scott Jackson's gym in Dorset, and I filmed a gym review just on my phone and just went home and wrote a little script for it. And that's kind of where it all started. It was like, I was like, oh, actually, I can pluck that thing from that skateboard creator and put a parkour lens on it, and it shows a parkour gym that people may not know exists, or they haven't had the chance to see what the gym offers and all of this. So yeah, and then that snowballed into parkour parks, which then led to parkour spots, which led to spot and history breakdown. And then I kind of just went into the whole creative sphere with it. I was like, I'm just going to try and see what I can create that I enjoy watching, but from a parkour lens, basically. It's a very long story and very waffly, but yeah, like right now it's just a case of, you know, I like viewing at memes sometimes. I think there's a lot of stuff in parkour that we're aware probably comes across as a little bit silly and a little bit weird. And I think, you know, it's especially from like the meme side of things, it's, I think, important for us to laugh at ourselves a little bit and kind of, you know, share that. And it's just this kind of weird thing where it's like the idea of it is keeps me connected with parkour if I can't train. The community somewhat understand it and they can probably get a laugh out of it. But also it's now feels like I'm, at least for me, documenting where this current point of my training journey is right now. So
Yeah, and you are back to training. For anybody who's listening that's not familiar, you've been posting some really cool training content, like we'd mentioned, in Horsham, doing some 180s and stuff. And yeah, how has your training recovery been from that? I haven't heard that story. I knew that you had that injury, but that's wild.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. Is just one way to put it. I think what this isn't. I don't want to say that this is for every medical professional, but I do think a lot of the time they have to cover their own backside a little bit. So I think they always give you like um, the worst possible outcome. And I think, when I was in the hospital and I couldn't really make sense of what was going on because my head hurt so much, I think I went and took on that worst situation. So I've like had a really supportive network. So my girlfriend, who's sat in the other room currently, my family, all the guys that I coach with, and interestingly, the guy that owns the coaching business that I coach at, his partner runs an aerial business, so doing like hoops and silks and sling. And one of her instructors is a physio that specializes in individuals with head injuries and getting them back to sport.
Oh, wow.
So she volunteered her time to come to my flat and basically helped me get started with physiotherapy to get me back to moving again. So it was really weird. It was like sitting on a chair, touching my right shoulder, but standing up and turning to my left. So it's like replicating a 180 almost.
Mm-hmm.
And basically because we share the building with the aerial company and she's an instructor there, she'd seen the movements that we'd been doing in our classes or in our open sessions and took that on board to incorporate this physical physiotherapy for me in that recovery. So 6 months in, I managed to start getting somewhat back into things lightly, but it was a very sort of up and down sort of thing. The physical side of things now are really good for me. I've got like a little bit of a wrist problem, but I'm able to get outside. I am able to move. I'm ticking off challenges which were previously really difficult and really challenging, which is for me really good.
Yeah.
But it's the mental aspect of things. And it's quite a hard thing to kind of like, I think, communicate across sometimes to people. But physically, like, I can move, I can pick something up, I can move around, but the mental aspect of things is incredibly challenging. So I've got a post going out in a few days that kind of talks about it a bit more, but the 60 to 90-second movement breakdown video that I share on Instagram, that is probably about 2 hours worth of training, like broken down into like the 90-second segment, and is probably the one thing that I focused on in that session that day, because physically I feel absolutely fine that I can go for anything and can take on the world, but the mental energy that it takes on me now is incredibly taxing. So it's weird, like I have to be super cautious with my training. I have to absolutely make sure that there is no way something can go wrong, because I can't take that risk of hitting my head again. But I'm having more fun with the process of it, because when I achieve something, it really feels like I've worked towards it and I've really broken it down a little bit. So yeah, it's fun getting back to it, and like I said, I'm surprising myself even more each session, and I thought, why not document that and capture it as well? So
Yeah, well, it's been really fun to watch. So thank you for doing that. And I am, yeah, really glad you're healthy. People who know me, that I grew up in the New York City community, we had a tragedy of somebody who passed after hitting their head in a similar situation. And yeah, having to see somebody go through that and hearing your story and seeing you be able to get back to where you're at, I don't think watching your content I would even know that you're having any kind of difficulty. So you're certainly not externalizing it to the viewer at all. My question, hearing you talk about just the angle that you're taking and how you're trying to share your experience, it sounds like a lot of it is for the parkour community. Do you feel like there's a split of, you make certain things that you want to reach outside to people who maybe aren't trying parkour but want to try parkour, or do you feel like it's all pretty much for people who are kind of in the know in the culture already?
I would like to think it's hopefully a bit of both, but I do think probably the stuff that I'm sharing at the moment is probably lent more towards the community, I think. But there's been, I guess, like a few of the movement tips that I've been sharing. So I, been experimenting a little bit, like I said, with different types of content. Some of that has been, uh, trying to break down how to do a parkour roll or things like that. Um,
Do
and
we
I'd like
still
to
do
think,
those? So
I'd like to think that, someone outside of parkour can look at that and say, like, get started because of it. But I think a lot of the content that I do share is very community focused. That being
Mhm.
said, I've obviously got friends following me on social media that have no interest in parkour whatsoever, but they've dropped me messages or comments or whatever, being like, that one's quite good. Like, that makes me feel interested, or that's funny, or, whatever sort of thing. So I guess I posted one earlier today, which was about, member of the public. It was like a little skit sort of thing. It was the first one of that kind that I posted, so I was a little nervous about it. But it's about a member of the public asking you to do a backflip, and quite a few people have messaged me being like, that's pretty funny, and like they've gone through the page and seen parkour a little bit more. So
Yeah, I really like it. I'm glad that you're doing that. There's a lot of that content in the fitness space and in other sports like snowboarding or skating, and you see these personalities and they're able to do it, especially the skits. It's something that it's funny that you say you're a little bit nervous. Even doing a podcast, or I've been like doing a review video, these things that are a little bit, my comfort zone was very much just sharing training content, and I like to create content outside of that space, but the idea of sharing it inside parkour felt so weird. And it's been interesting to try and just embrace that it might not be everybody's cup of tea, but that is the only way that you'll reach new people is by trying new things. This also feels like a good point to talk a little bit about your work with Parkour UK, because you were just saying how, some of the stuff that you're doing, you're getting feedback from inside and outside the community. Would you mind just talking about your position at Parkour UK and what your role is there?
yeah, so I've been with Parkour UK since 2022, specifically in a digital role. So I'm the digital lead there, and that's anything from maintaining the social media, so posting out to social media, replying to emails, all the way through to sorting the website out, or if someone's having any email login issues within the organization, I deal with that as well. So the fun stuff and the not so fun stuff. Um, yeah, I've been with them for 4 years now, coming up to 4 years. It's been great. I really enjoy my job there. It gets me out in the community a bit more. I've met some amazing people like through it. And yeah, so yeah, that's pretty much the brief story of that.
Yeah, for the content that you make in with Parkour UK, because I see the LinkedIn game is strong for Parkour
Thank you.
UK, uh, which is, it's so funny because I'm on LinkedIn, and this is where the podcast becomes 30 and up, I think, or at least 26 and up maybe. Mm, but the LinkedIn parkour scene is like all of the old heads who now own gyms or are in these governing bodies. And it's cool because I look at things like a Parkour UK post, and the audience there on LinkedIn, those are going to be, the sponsor that sponsored whatever Project Underground from 3 years ago, and they see this post, or it's going to be some vitamin water CEO who's looking at parkour and interested in getting involved. So how do you think about the different audiences that you're speaking to? And do you feel like you craft content differently for Parkour UK versus your personal stuff that you're making?
Yeah, with Parkour UK, I think what's great is we have a team of us all together. So there'll be like video projects and stuff that go out there, that, or the podcast, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I have no involvement in that other than clicking share on that post button and maybe writing a description or two. But we have we have a board, executive board and things like that have different varying specialties or experiences. So we've got someone on there from a safeguarding perspective, someone on there with digital and marketing expertise, and they've been great because it's with a team of individuals from parkour and who are not from parkour. It's very easy for the parkour heads to get very excited and very hyped up about parkour, and then forget that actually we do need to try and speak to people outside of the sport as well. So the board has been great for kind of holding us accountable to that. But it's exactly what you said there. It's like different audiences are most likely going to sit on different platforms. So in the case that you said there, and it's like a really good example, commercial opportunities are going to be prominent on LinkedIn. Like that's a given. This is a social network platform that's based on jobs and all of that sort of stuff. So on there we'll maybe look at sharing some of the wider work that is done that maybe some of the community won't be massively interested in. There's going to be some stuff that goes across all platforms because we want to share and shout the work that we do, but it's formatting the different pieces of content depending on so there might be a bit of information that goes out on safeguarding. It's not the most exciting thing to read about. It can be quite upsetting to a few individuals depending on the topic and the subject.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that will probably work better on LinkedIn and going specifically out to our member organizations, whereas something like the Bristol project will perform better on Instagram, for example, because it's a community focused piece and the community are going to engage with it on their sort of thing. With my own content, I share on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. And I've started sharing some of it personally on LinkedIn as well. And that's been very surprising how much engagement that's gotten on LinkedIn with the kind of content that I'm sharing with it. I think it's all storytelling. That's the important thing is, I think, is how you tell that story and how you package it and how it sort of comes across, I think.
Yeah. So I have a question for you there. Have you noticed any trends in either things that you thought were going to be bangers or you felt were really relevant to you that underperformed, or things that way overperformed that you were unsure of?
I think the immediate example is obviously Callum released his book last week. I think the next day or the day after, I put a bit of a meme together, which was just like a clip from Breaking Bad of the guy reading the book. I almost didn't share that video, that little reel. It's like 10 seconds long. I looked at it, I was like, I feel like this is going to be too niche for me to share. And I was like, I'll just do it anyway. And it's been one of the best performing pieces of content that I've shared in the last 3 months in the space of two to 3 days.
Wow.
I don't think something like, I'm kind of like thinking about it, I don't think that video is going to work so well on like YouTube or TikTok because I think a lot of the immediate parkour community will see Callum Powell and go, that's Callum from Stora, whereas I think YouTube pushes it a little bit wider than the kind of community that you're in, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a surprising one. From a Parkour UK standpoint, the Bristol project completely exceeded any expectation that we had whatsoever.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
yeah, and interestingly, the demographics around it surprised us as well. I think one of the largest audience bases for that project was, I think, individuals over 50. So
Wow.
like really completely, we knew it was going to be like a big-ish piece for us, but with the views that it got, the amount of subscribers it brought in, the amount of feedback it got, the amount of comments,
Mm-hmm.
completely, blew expectations out the water.
Yeah. Feel free to say if you can't say this, but on the back end, because I really enjoyed seeing Parkour UK put that type of content out, and I've been through Point A working with a USPK, hopefully on getting something collaborative done by the end of this year. But that felt like a great proof of concept. And was it received that way? Like when you see that kind of success, is it then easier to motivate a governing body or organization like Parkour UK to continue to put some money into pieces like that?
I think so. With that Bristol project, that was kind of penciled together by Charlie Havel,
Mm-hmm.
and Max Ward, when they joined the organisation. So our current CEO, who's called Sam Bradley, our head of development, our connecting communities team, and our people and coaching lead all joined at the same time. And when they kind of came on board, I think Parkour UK was always seen as a bit of a faceless organisation, and the community may have felt that we weren't doing enough for parkour and the community. So when those guys all came on board, we penciled up the Bristol project as a community focused piece to to look at changing the perception of parkour, because if you've seen the video,
Mm-hmm.
it's a video that explores high level movement, but the process behind it, like the storytelling behind it, the process that Joe or Danny or Stanny or anyone goes through to get those viral clips for social media. And there was a little bit of pushback from the board because it doesn't really align with the organization's strategy, and it doesn't target children or young people or people of low socioeconomic backgrounds or things. But it is a community piece, and we had a little bit of back and forth with them, whether this was the right call. We did it. The video went out. It exceeded expectation. It showed that there was a demand there for video projects like that, and now we're looking forward at creating the same thing, but aligning it more to the organization's goals and strategy. So it was a fantastic proof of concept for us to
Mm-hmm.
kind of be like, because these video projects aren't cheap. We're paying for the
Yeah.
accommodation for the athletes.
Oh, trust
It's
me, I know, buddy. At Point A, out of pocket for the last 5 years. So self-funded film industry is
yeah.
challenging. Yeah.
So yeah, it's so obviously we wanted to make sure that the athletes were paid for their time, making sure that there was that for them as well. So
Mm-hmm.
we probably won't spend as much on another one, because I think we were under budget, but it was still quite expensive, especially when your main source of income at that point was primarily from Sport England, who's our giving us
Mm-hmm.
the 1.5 million over 5 years, or whatever, the funding pot basically.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're looking forward. We've got a few ideas. We're obviously penciling some stuff up, There's a few. I won't go into too much detail on what we've got
Yeah,
penciled up because I don't want to
I don't want to
promise
get you in
anything
trouble.
and under deliver. Yeah, but yeah, it worked really well. It was a great proof of concept for us. So
That's really exciting. Yeah, I guess I wanted to. I'm curious. I was listening to I don't know if you probably already listened to the recent Store podcast. They revived it after a year and
yes,
did a PPP, and it was interesting because they go a bit into towards the end how the Brighton scene has this big age gap, sort of like demographic shift, where there's a fantastic community of people who are 20 to 35, and then really nobody underneath them. And this has come up a few times in different conversations. And I'm always curious to see geographically what's happening. In the US, I think, for instance, we see a lot of communities that have really weak adult representation. I think about, I mean, California is a bad example because it has a few really strong, prominent athletes on social media, but there are probably 8 gyms with 2 to 4 or 500 members under the age of 12. So you're talking 4,000 active students in the state that are under the age of 12, I would say, versus maybe 100 people across the state that are 25 and older that are regularly training parkour outside. The US almost seems like it has the opposite problem. Do you feel like, because from a content perspective, we talked about, hearing you talk about Parkour UK, saying, well, we want to create something that's maybe more aligned with the values of reaching out to younger people and activating a different demographic. What do you think the content is that reaches both? Because I look at the stuff that reached me when I was 14, that reached a lot of my peers, and it was the sort of longer form Bristol project type things. I didn't really need to see kids doing it to feel like I could do it. I actually wanted to see adults doing it that I could look up to and emulate. So, and you don't need to step into Parkour UK shoes or anything for this. I'm just curious for like your personal take. What do you think is the content that can engage both? Because there's like the Bob Reese, Nick Provo style content that's very just geared to like YouTube shorts spamming younger kids and doesn't really get them probably to try parkour, but makes them aware of it. And then obviously there's like a capstone type thing that's very core community focused. But from your perspective, yeah, what do you feel like is the balance there for a broad audience?
I think this. I'm probably going to give a bit of a different answer than what people would probably expect. I think it would almost be a way of like the same piece of content, but it totally depends how you package it. So let's use something like a capstone video, for example. Um, let's say your young child, young kid, um, they're probably not going to sit down and watch a 15-minute long YouTube video because they're used to scrolling through, particularly TikTok. And this is me, sitting on the, back in my day sort of thing. But, a kid these days isn't going to sit down and watch a
I was
15.
reading Thucydides at age 12 in the original Greek. The kids these days, man.
They're not going to sit and watch a YouTube video. And my youngest brother is within that age group. He's just about to turn 15, and he is on TikTok or YouTube Shorts, but he will not sit down and watch a long form YouTube
Mhm.
video. Whereas someone who is in that older demographic will probably most likely want to watch that longer form YouTube video. So I think it will be the same piece of content, but it's depends how you package it. And this is something that I found really useful with the when I did the visit to the DIY yard that Super
Mhm.
XXL made. is I made a long YouTube video and I just cut little snippets out of that video and shared it across all the short form platforms, YouTube Shorts,
Mm-hmm.
TikTok, Instagram. And what I found particularly on TikTok is I overlaid those training clips with some of the storytelling aspects and tried to keep it under the kind of 30-second mark. And those pieces of content got a lot of engagement from younger people because they don't want to sit down and watch a full 15-minute long yard walking spot tour, but they see that clip of Orlando doing that big Grand Prix and you've captioned it with a few words, and I'm very aware of that. Like, I put the captions
Yeah.
on my videos, I do the cuts, I do all of that, because those quick cuts, that bit of change or whatever, that's going to keep that person who's watching the short form a bit more interested. But I think sort of going back to the original point is, I think for us to reach both people, we can do that with exactly the same piece of content, but it depends how you package and structure that piece of content. And that's why I think storytelling is such an important aspect of things. A capstone video within itself is a fantastic watch, but I do sometimes sit there and I think I would love to see the process behind this, or hear the story behind this jump, or in
Mm-hmm.
Dom's case, when he had that head injury, which was super useful for me because that video came out not too long after I had my head injury. He made that behind the scenes video talking about it. I found that far more interesting than the actual capstone edit itself, because you learn a bit more about what goes on, and it's a bit more work for the creator because obviously you're shooting this big project and you've got to consider,
Mm-hmm.
how's this going to perform on TikTok or whatever. But even just, a split screen of the clip on top, the person talking underneath, that's already visually appealing to someone. They're seeing something cool and they're learning a little bit about it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's how we do it. I think it's the cool stuff that goes on, but the education around it as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think I'm curious on your take. Part of me, because I think I grew up in this sort of previous era, hates the idea of playing the algorithm and everything that you're saying. I think like Gatecrash is a great example. When it came out, I started cutting shorts, and well, my day job picked up, so I suddenly was working 50 hours a week and I didn't have time to edit a ton of shorts and BTS, and I had a couple done and then got sidetracked. But the challenge that I faced is, I think a lot of people may struggle with the long form content can feel authentic to them, but then trying to distill it into a different medium and make it palatable in the 15 or 30 or 45-second format feels like, well, that's not capstone anymore. Or, well, if we're making this culture changing thing or culture defining piece of content and it gets 80,000 views or 200,000 views or 400,000, like, that's enough. That's great. But the reality is that you have Matt LaRose with 20 million YouTube subscribers making, live action Mario, like jumping through hoops in his hallway of his flat in Montreal. Like, is there a way, or do you have any words of advice for people to balance that act of, and I'm not saying that the point of capstone isn't necessarily to try and spread parkour to a new demographic or engage people who don't already know about the sport. And it's fine for projects to kind of have a single purpose and only have a single purpose. Like, that's incredibly valuable. Not everything needs to serve all masters. But for somebody who does want to do that and is trying to cut these things down, how do you think about that? How do you think about balancing this like authentic voice for the core community with something that reaches more people?
I think I've been having to think about this recently because, let's go back to the example of that little meme clip that I shared of Callum's book the other day. It's like I almost didn't post it, and the reason that I didn't want to post it out, and I guess similar with the skit video earlier on as well, is like, I don't really want it to come across as cringy, but sometimes cringy is like a bit of a good thing, because you're, as hard as it is, it's like, and I think a lot, it totally depends what you want this video project to be. Are you looking to get as many eyes on it as possible? Then yes, absolutely, you need to shorten that down into some kind of short form content, because that is what is being pushed at the moment on all these platforms: Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. You know, you can link those your long video back to these short form videos now. So you could get, you know, if say something like a DOM clip, which usually always performs super well, if that is linked to a longer YouTube video project, that's already more eyes on it. But I think people was like, I don't want to kind of fall into this short form content trap, because I don't want it to come across as cringy, or I don't feel like it's authentic and stuff. Be cringy, like absolutely be cringy, because a lot of the time you think it's going to be cringy and other people aren't going to care. And if they do think it's cringy, it's really not the end of the world. Being cringy is good because you're stepping out of your comfort zone, you're trying something new, and a lot of the time it's not going to be as bad as you think it's going to be. And I always like to think that people thinking that you're being a bit cringy or a bit weird or a bit odd or a bit strange or whatever is the foundation of what builds up something better in the future. Like, cringe comes first, and then everything else comes after, you know. And
you're gonna suck at the thing that you do the first many times. For most of us, you get a few savants. I mean, you look at like Sasha and Toby's old edits. I don't think there was a bad one from the beginning. We're not all that talented, so you're gonna have to make some bad or cringy content. But I think that's a great example, because I saw that meme and I saw the skit and I'm like, oh, that's awesome that Callun's experimenting with this. I'm not gonna unsubscribe, or I'm not gonna unfollow you, or even think it's weird, unless it suddenly becomes the only thing that that person shares. And I had the same conversation with Callum last week. We were talking about the book, and he was talking about when Store started doing vlogs, how they all felt so self-conscious about it. But in a way, and I want to kind of tie this back to our earlier conversation about these sort of golden years, in a way, it almost is a way to bring the culture, the soft moments, like the quiet framing that you miss in social media, back in the context of this medium, because the things that you're sharing, I do now suddenly get to see you walking around the park, and maybe there's a short highlight clip of something funny that happened that is just, that is the post for the day. And I know that tomorrow there's going to be something that's more action oriented, and then the next day is going to be something that makes me laugh, or it's the Suey Wall meme of Willem Dafoe looking up in horror and admiration, which that was my favorite one. I loved that one, having experienced that many times in Brighton at Suey Wall. But I guess, do you feel like that is potentially a way to tap back in to what we were talking about earlier, that thing that maybe parkour has been missing a bit of?
Yeah, I think so, and that's kind of why I've wanted to do it a little bit. I think I miss those like golden moments, and I know a lot of people out there probably also miss them, and I can't recreate those golden moments from those old parkour videos, but I can spoof them. I can overlay a meme over the top of it, or in the the topic of like completing a movement or a challenge or whatever. So I could just tell the story about that sort of thing. I think being diverse is important. I don't want to just be a meme page, or I don't just want to be a coaching page. You've got to diversify that content a bit. But I think to kind of reclaim back to those golden years, yes, people can share their training clips, but for I don't know if this is the way that I've matured as I've gotten older through training, but I want I always just want that little bit more from a training clip that someone shares. It's like it could be very impressive and I absolutely appreciate it, but I want that story behind it, or I'm waiting for someone to stick their head out from the other side of the wall and wave their hands or do something funny, you know. And I think that's just how I grew up watching parkour content was like. So yeah, I think like just for me, I feel like sometimes parkour takes itself a bit too seriously. With people sharing their clips on social media all the time, um, I feel like we've lost that element of, I wouldn't necessarily say comedy, but the lightheartedness sometimes within
Hmm.
parkour. I feel like it's gone a little bit, and it's just my way of trying to bring it back a little bit. And sometimes, I look at it and I'm like, oh, that's going to be awful to post, or maybe that video is not done so well. But I've enjoyed sharing it. I've enjoyed laughing in my own head whilst I'm making the meme, or whilst I'm telling the story or whatever. I'm like, I've shared my bit with that. At the end of the day, if one person relates to it, if one person gets something from it, if one person shares it with a friend or whatever, I've done my job with it, essentially, So
Yeah, that feels like a great place to end. I think that's spot on. So I'll ask you the final question that I like to ask everybody. What would be one piece of media that you would recommend to the listener?
that is a very good question. Very good question. This is one that I have been recommending to some of the intermediate/advanced students that I've been coaching. Um, I tell them, once a week, go and watch a parkour film and come back and tell me about it, sort of thing. And that one would be the Jump London or Jump Britain, specifically because right now we haven't really had one of those documentaries. I know We Are Star is coming up, hopefully soon, but like for a lot of people, that's what got them into parkour. That's what got them started. That's the foundations of, and it's probably a very boring response to a lot of people. They're like, oh, someone else is going on about those documentaries again. Um, but they were so important to the early scene. And without those documentaries, for me, I wouldn't be here making memes and telling stories as I am now, So it's that
Yeah.
kind of snowball effect. So
Yeah, and the amount of people who say, "Oh, this person's recommending Jump Britain again," and have not watched Jump Britain despite it being fully available for free on YouTube is a surprising percentage of practitioners. So I think that's a great recommendation. And we've talked a lot about the value of those films today, but also on a bunch of previous episodes. So, Callan, thank you so much for the amazing content that you're creating. I am having a blast. I love watching the not cringe on my perspective, potentially internally cringe stuff. But yeah, dude, keep experimenting. It's been so fun to see what you're making.
thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
I love that episode. And even though Callan said multiple times he felt like he was rambling, after a 2.5-ish hour episode with Callum last week talking about the history of parkour, this one felt like a refreshing snack. It was a light and breezy ordeal compared to that one. It was just a really fun chat with him. I love how his history of parkour has really informed the way that he's making content. And as you guys probably know, I've been exploring this kind of content as well and just figuring out different ways to communicate parkour to different audiences. And for me, that was the biggest takeaway is that there is an authentic way to share your experience and your message of the sport with people who are the true heads that will sit and watch a capstone marathon, and also to somebody's parent who practices the sport, or to a 12-year-old kid on TikTok. I don't know what the minimum age is on TikTok, actually. You can tell that I'm not on TikTok. Hopefully 12-year-olds aren't on there. Let's say a 16-year-old kid on TikTok. Um, But I think that that was a really powerful takeaway, and what Callun is doing is awesome. I think for the community, if you're not already following him across those platforms I mentioned, it's at Callun, Callun Parkour, and go check out his stuff. As always, thanks for listening. Really appreciate it, and I will catch you guys next week.